Attention! The uncut version is posted in the comments, so be prepared. Father Anthony and I were on the porch of that abandoned house, hidden in the middle of the tall grass that had taken over the old farm. It was a place forgotten by everyone. Broken windows, wood swollen by time, the smell of abandonment mixed with the stifling heat of the late afternoon. The undergrowth grew unchecked, covering everything around it, as if nature was determined to hide that house from the world. And maybe that was exactly what made it the perfect place for us to lose ourselves in each other. The porch, though old, still stood strong. The boards creaked under our feet, and the light wind made the leaves brush against each other, creating a constant, almost hypnotic background sound. We were there, together, close, our bodies pressed against each other, the silence filled with short breaths, long looks, touches that spoke louder than any words. It was a moment that belonged only to us. One of those moments suspended in time, where nothing existed but the warmth between us. His hands touched me gently and firmly, like someone who knows the way well. I held him as if afraid to let go and wake up. And it was at that moment, when everything seemed too quiet, that the sound of a branch breaking took our breath away. I looked instinctively. A figure in the bushes. And then he appeared, my father-in-law. He came slowly, as if drawn by something he couldn't explain. His hat crumpled in his hand, his eyes wide and motionless, as if time had stopped there. In the scene he was witnessing the two of us, together, in that hidden place, on that porch that, until seconds before, had been a refuge. Silence fell like a stone. The wind seemed to stop. The sound of the leaves ceased. Anthony froze beside me. So did I. The world stopped, and all that remained was the sound of my heart beating too fast in my chest and the weight of that gaze upon us. "My God," he said, his voice low, dry, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Calvin?" There was nothing left to hide. Shame hit me like a dull blow. The sweat, which had been from heat and desire, now ran cold down my back. The time we thought we were stealing to live in silence. Suddenly, it was over. There on the porch hidden by the bushes, the truth had been forcibly torn from its hiding place. And nothing would ever be the same again. I'll tell you how it all happened, from the beginning. As you know, I had been having an affair with the priest in our small town for over 3 years. That place where everyone knows each other, where any sidelong glance can turn into gossip, and a simple delay in Mass is the talk of the town at the Saturday market. 3 years of secret meetings, between shadows and silences, with my heart always racing, not only from desire, but from the constant fear of being seen. With every step, every stolen touch, it was as if the world around us was about to collapse, and yet we continued. It was a warm, late afternoon, one of those when the sky slowly turns golden behind the hills, and the smell of warm earth rises from the ground along with the fine dust kicked up by my footsteps. I was in the middle of the field, assessing the crops, walking between the rows, watching the green grow, measuring with my eyes what the harvest promised. The silence was good. Only the sound of the wind rustling the leaves and the song of a bird or two broke the monotony of that endless field. That's when my cell phone vibrated in my jeans pocket. I picked it up with my dirt-stained hand, without rushing, and when I looked at the screen, a smile escaped me, almost involuntarily. It was a message from Anthony. "Hi, you sexy bastard. I want to see you. Where are you?" I read that sentence there, standing in the middle of nowhere, with the evening light hitting my shoulders and my heart already racing, just imagining his voice saying that. I replied without thinking too much. "I'm in the middle of the field, near that abandoned house." The reply came quickly, as if he had been waiting for an opening. "Can I come over? I want to see you." A quiet laugh escaped me. The smile was still on my face. "Sure. Come on over. I'll wait for you at the house." "Okay. I'll be right there," he said. And there, among the cornstalks, dry mud, and the sky that was beginning to burn with shades of orange, I knew that this afternoon would not end like the others. After he said, "I'll be right there," I put my phone in my pocket and stood there for a while, lost in thought, my gaze wandering between the rows of crops and my heart beating at a different rhythm. The late afternoon light was already tinging everything with gold, the field, the leaves, even the dust seemed to shine. I took a deep breath, smelled the earth mixed with the sweat on my skin, and began to walk slowly toward that old abandoned house, the same one that the weeds insisted on hiding from the world, as if it were a secret only ours. With each step, the ground crunched softly under my boots, and the silence of the afternoon was filled with anticipation of what was to come. I reached the porch, sat on the worn wooden step, and stayed there. My hands, dirty with earth, rested on my knees, the sun slowly setting behind the hills, and the sound of the wind swaying the tall grass around me. Time seemed to pass more slowly when I was waiting for him. And even after so many encounters, my body still reacted as it did the first time. My breath shortened. A shiver slowly ran up my spine, and I had the feeling that something was about to happen, and that, even without knowing how, I was already surrendered. From a distance, I heard the sound of a car approaching. It was discreet, but there, in the middle of the field, any new noise cut through the silence with force. I got up slowly, my heart racing without warning. I stood in the corner of the porch, looking through the leaves, until I saw his truck coming down the dirt road. It made its way through the brush, kicking up dust in the air, and when it stopped near the fallen fence, I knew it was him, even before I saw his face. Just the way he drove, the calm way he turned off the engine, got out with the door creaking softly, as if the world were in no hurry. Anthony got out wearing a light-colored shirt with rolled-up sleeves, an open collar, dark jeans, and the same look as always, one that mixed calm with something hidden, lit, latent. He looked at me and smiled, that smile that only he knew how to give. And at that moment, even without saying anything, I knew what we had still burned the same way. Anthony approached slowly, with that steady but serene gait, like someone who knows exactly where they're going and why. The evening light touched his face softly, gilding his skin, drawing each feature with that delicacy that only the end of the day knows. His hair was slightly tousled by the wind, his expression calm, but with a different sparkle in his eyes, a sparkle that revealed everything he didn't say with words. When he reached the porch, he paused for a moment. He looked me up and down as if to check if I was still real. I also stood still, not knowing whether to go to him or wait for him to take the first step. But it didn't take long. He climbed the first step, then the second, and when he was face to face with me, he said nothing. He just reached out, slowly touched the hem of my sweaty shirt, and pulled gently, as if asking without demanding, as if touching just to make sure the other person was there, whole, present. His eyes sought mine for a second that seemed too long, and then he came. The kiss was slow. It began almost like a sigh, our lips meeting gently, fitting together as if they already knew the way. His hand moved up to the back of my neck, firm, and pulled me slowly closer, bringing our bodies together without haste, as if that gesture alone were already a promise. The taste of his mouth was warm, familiar, with an undertone of longing that had built up too much. His tongue came next, shy at first, but soon took up space, exploring with more desire, more surrender. I held on tight to his waist, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath the thin fabric, and pulled him closer, until his whole body was pressed against mine. It was there, with my mouth pressed against his, the smell of dusk mixed with that of his neck, and the tall grass protecting us from everything, that I knew once again that no matter how hidden it was, that love existed, and it was real. The kiss lasted long enough to make me forget where we were. When we pulled apart, he still kept his forehead against mine, his eyes closed, breathing heavily. "I needed that," he murmured, his voice hoarse, almost failing. "Me too," I replied, my eyes still closed, trying to keep that whole moment inside me. There, on the porch of that hidden house, with the sky changing color above us, everything seemed too calm to be true. The mood had heated up right there, on the porch of that abandoned house. The tall grass around us hid the house from the rest of the world, and we let ourselves go. It was as if there was no more time, no guilt, no fear, just the heat of our bodies pressed together, the smell of dusk, and the old desire that was now spiraling out of control. We gave ourselves over to it, without thinking, without measuring. The kisses became more intense, the touches more desperate, and everything fell apart with a haste that only those who repress themselves too much know. Our hands sought skin, our bodies reacted instinctively, and there, on that old wooden porch, amid the rustling of leaves and the golden sky at the end of the day, we were almost there, our hearts racing, our breathing heavy, Our whole bodies surrendered. But it was at that very moment that Frank, my father-in-law, appeared. I didn't even have time to hear his footsteps. He emerged from the bushes, coming from the side of the house, and when I saw him, he was already there standing, looking at us, his face filled with astonishment. Hat in hand, eyes wide, mouth half open as if he had lost his breath. I froze. I didn't know what to do. My instincts told me to run, get dressed, get out of there. But my body froze. My hands were shaking. My skin was burning. But it was no longer from desire, it was from shock, shame, fear. Anthony also stood motionless. His eyes were fixed on the floor, as if this were a nightmare from which he had not yet managed to wake up. And then Frank spoke. His voice was low but firm, laden with shock and disbelief. "My God. Calvin. What are you doing?" And everything stopped. After Frank said that, "My God, Calvin, what are you doing?" there was a heavy silence on the porch. Time seemed to have stopped, as if even the wind didn't know how to react. He looked at us for a moment that seemed like an eternity, and then turned his back and walked away. But before he disappeared into the plantation, something unexpected happened. Something that in the uncut version I'll tell you in full detail, and I guarantee you, it will surprise you. When he disappeared into the tall grass, Anthony and I were still paralyzed. Slowly, we began to get dressed, without saying a word. Our fingers were shaking. Our breathing was short, as if the air had become heavier after that. Anthony looked at me, a confused expression on his face, somewhat bewildered, and blurted out, "Shit, what was that?" I took a deep breath, still trying to understand what had just happened, and replied, "I don't understand either." He looked away, picked up what was left, and left. Just like that. No further words. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to compose myself, still with the taste of fear stuck in my throat. Then I straightened my shirt, took a deep breath, and went home. With my head spinning, my body still warm, and a question that wouldn't leave me. What now? The days went by. And as much as the farm routine tried to pull me back into autopilot, it was impossible to forget what had happened on that porch. Frank's face, his voice, the shock, and especially the silence with which he turned his back and left. That scene came back to my mind every time I passed by the plantation. The memory still throbbed in my body like a fever that wouldn't break. And it was on a night like any other. One of those nights when everything seemed too normal that it happened. I was in the kitchen, setting the table, the smell of food in the air, my mind far away. That's when my wife, without even raising her voice, said casually, "Honey, my father is coming to dinner with us tonight." At that moment, my whole body reacted. I tried to hide it, just nodded my head and replied calmly, "Okay," but inside, anxiety hit me hard. A weight in my stomach, a tightness in my chest. I was afraid, not only of what he might say, but of the way he might look at me, because it wasn't just any dinner. It was the first face-to-face meeting after everything. After the naked, raw, silent truth, the one he saw with his own eyes, and took away without saying another word. And now, he was coming here, to sit at our table, to eat from our plate, to sit face to face with me, with his daughter by his side, not knowing if he was going to speak, or keep it to himself, forever. The clock ticked away the hours as if to remind me that the moment was coming. And the air in the house, which had been normal, every day, now seemed denser, more charged. It wasn't long before Mr. Frank arrived, bringing my mother-in-law with him, as usual, both coming with that calm manner of those who are already part of the routine of the house, almost always at the same time, with the same care in their gestures and greetings. He entered with a serious expression, his body upright as always, his light-colored dress shirt tucked into his well-pressed jeans, his hat in his hand, and his eyes filled with a steadiness that only he knew how to maintain, even in the simplest moments. She, on the other hand, arrived smiling, light-hearted, already talking about the smell of the food, the details of the recipe she had brought, and asking about her grandson with that usual affection that seemed to have been unaffected by anything. We sat at the table as on any other day, with the dishes being passed from hand to hand, the glasses being filled slowly, and the conversation unfolding on the usual topics, the unpredictable weather, the state of the crops, the children's behavior at school, the usual complaints about the mayor, the noisy neighbors, and the repeated stories that we hear every week, and pretend to listen to as if it were the first time. Everything seemed normal, but inside me, nothing was normal. Frank didn't say a single word about what had happened that afternoon on the porch of the abandoned house. No hint, no noticeable change in tone of voice, not even a strange pause in his sentences that might reveal that something was bothering him. But even with that well-maintained silence, I knew. I saw it. I felt it. And I carried in my chest the uncomfortable certainty that behind every glance he cast in my direction, there was something heavy, suspended, as if the words he was choking back were accumulating inside him and were always about to escape. Every time he stared at me, between bites, between sips of the juice my wife served or a casual comment about the price of fertilizer, I saw in his eyes a restrained judgment, a silent question, a memory too recent not to be burning there, behind that closed and restrained expression. And I, sitting across the table, pretending to be normal, keeping a smile when I needed to, giving the occasional automatic response when asked a question, could only think about how much that silence weighed more than any direct confrontation would have weighed. It was as if he said everything without saying anything. And every minute of that dinner, which to anyone else would seem like any other, was an eternity for me, sustained by the fear of what could come at any moment, a harsh word, a change in tone, an unexpected gesture. But he said nothing. Nothing. And perhaps that was precisely why. It was even harder to breathe. Later, after dinner was over, and the atmosphere in the house seemed to have returned to the usual calm of evenings in the countryside, my father-in-law turned to me, his voice firm but with a restrained tone that immediately made me pay more attention, and said simply, "Calvin, I need to go to the gas station to fill up the truck. Will you come with me?" For a second, my body hesitated inside, but I knew there was no way to refuse, not without seeming strange, not without raising more suspicion than I already imagined he might have been harboring in his eyes since that afternoon. So I just forced a slight smile, trying to keep my tone natural, and replied, "Sure, let's go. Just let me get my wallet." He nodded briefly and stood up slowly, while I went to the bedroom, my heart already beating a little faster than normal, and grabbed my wallet from the nightstand, feeling the weight of that invitation echoing inside my chest, because as simple as the request was, I knew something was about to happen. We left in silence. We crossed the yard with the smell of night in the air, that warm wind blowing through the trees and the distant sound of crickets filling the spaces between unspoken words. We got into the truck. He was behind the wheel, as always, his arms firmly on the time-worn steering wheel. I was in the passenger seat, with the window half open, letting the air in slowly, as if that could calm the tension that was beginning to grow inside me. And then we headed for the gas station, with the road ahead of us and silence filling the space between us, dense, heavy, almost louder than if we were arguing. I looked out the window, but my attention was on him. Every gesture, every sigh, every glance at the horizon, because I knew this wasn't just about filling up. After we filled up, still inside the truck with the engine running and the sound of fuel being swallowed by the newly filled tank, Frank looked at me with a steady gaze, the kind that doesn't look away or ask permission, and said in a calm voice, but one full of things left unsaid, "Let's go to Father Anthony's house." Right away, I felt my stomach churn. My body froze inside, as if time had paused just to see my reaction. I was surprised, not only by the idea itself, but by the direct way he said it, as if he had already decided before even asking me to fill up. I turned to him, trying to understand what was going on, and asked, still confused, "Do what?" He kept his eyes fixed on mine, without hesitation, and replied with that tense calm that weighs more than it shouts, "You know what." For a second, I hesitated, but I ended up smiling slightly, one of those smiles you give when you realize there's nowhere left to run, and replied in a low voice, "Okay, let's go." Frank then put the truck in gear, and we drove off. The road between the gas station and the rectory was short, but at that moment it seemed longer than ever. The silence inside the truck was heavy, and the headlights illuminated the dirt road ahead as my mind spun in circles, trying to imagine what he wanted, what he meant, and what Anthony would think when he saw us arriving like this together. We arrived in front of the priest's house. The gate was ajar, and the lights inside the living room were still on. The night was already dark, the sky black, and the silence around us only made everything more tense. We got out of the truck and knocked on the door. A few seconds later, it opened. Anthony appeared with a look of clear surprise on his face. His eyes widened immediately, and he took a slight step back, as if he didn't know whether this was a dream or a problem. His gaze quickly shifted from me to Frank, then back to me, loaded with questions he didn't have time to ask. My voice caught in my throat, but the silence between the three of us spoke volumes. He knew, and so did we. And then, that day, it happened. This time, everything was faster. There was no time to prolong anything, no room for hesitation. It wasn't like the other times, with lingering touches, whispered words in the dark, bodies begging for more. There, the moment had come with the force of someone who doesn't ask, just takes. We knew we couldn't delay. The place, the context, the risk. Everything made each gesture more restrained, more direct, more urgent. And even so, there was still enough intensity that it didn't seem rushed, it seemed necessary. As if there was something to be resolved there, something that could only be said with the body. And it was. No promises, no plans, no questions, just surrender. When it was over, the night was colder, the sky completely dark, and the walk back to the truck was done in silence, but a different kind of silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence heavy with meaning, full of something that had been done, and that now the three of us carried together. We drove home as if nothing had happened, with the headlights illuminating the road and the radio off, only the sound of the engine and the wind coming through the crack in the window. But there, in that car, on that simple drive back along the dirt road, a secret was kept. A secret that now wasn't just mine and Anthony's. It was ours, all three of us. That happened yesterday. It's still too fresh in my mind, the images, the sounds, the hurried touches, the looks that didn't say everything, but carried more than any words could ever carry. Since then, I haven't seen Frank, nor Father Anthony. Neither of them. The day dragged on, my body on autopilot, and my mind returning every hour to that night, to that quick, intense, unexpected moment, and now impossible to erase. The farm continued at its usual pace, the cattle, the fields, the neighbors greeting each other at the gate as if nothing had changed, but inside me, everything is different. Because I know that, from now on, any reunion could be the beginning of something I won't be able to control. I don't know what will happen from now on. I don't know if the silence will continue to hold what we did, or if some untimely word, some misplaced gesture, some longer than necessary glance will bring everything to the surface. I just hope that things don't get out of control. Because, for the first time, there's no longer just one secret between two people. Now there are three, and I have no idea how long this will last. Kisses and see you soon. Don't forget, the uncut version is posted in the comments,